the next step is to create a web component from scratch. I'm doing this without a lot of explanation, and in the next video I'm going to explain in detail what I have done, another kind of review of the anatomy of another web component, custom element component. So the web component I'm going to create is to be a my timer.ts, and then here we need to import the regular stuff from lit, and these are, we definitely need HTML. I'm not using CSS here. Lit element, this is one part. I need also decorators. Import from lit / decorators.js. Interestingly, here we have to define the JS, and then we need custom element, and I also need the property, and also need a state. The state is going to be the same as property, but without assigned to an attribute. So property is a state as well as an attribute from the perspective of HTML. State is just internal state. No attribute is linked to it. No HTML attribute. And then for the implementation, I also need a very nifty and brutally efficient tool from the lit types tool set, which is called lit async directives and / async replace. That's what I'm going to use, again JS async and then async replace. These are what I need, and then we can start defining our custom class, custom element, give it a name, something like my timer. I think that's going to be totally fine. And the class my timer, just a class name, extends lit element. Cool. And then let's define the first property, which is property. This property is going to be Boolean, and since it is not string, we can define it like so. Run, default value is false. That is when this timer component is started, created. It is not started automatically. And then I'm going to use a very fancy function, and then this is called iterator generator, actually regular JavaScript, nothing special here. Star a count up, just give it a fancy name, no arguments, and this count up is a member function here. You can also use an external function, but this is when I'm working with classes, I try to define everything as part of here. But anyway, then start const start when this whole timer is started. Use the date, sorry, date dot now. So now I have a value, then an infinite loop, but almost infinite. Then I am watching if the run value is true. If while it is true, it is just pumping out date dot now, pumping out values like yield now minus start why is it going to the left hand side of the arithmetic operation must of type any, we'll see later. And then yeah, these are functions. And then await new promise with a function or set timer, set timeout, or comma 100, that is 10 times per second, so it's waiting 100 milliseconds. That is, this yield produces 10 values every second. That's our engine for pumping out values. This is what is called in JavaScript iterator generators, value generators. And the way we can use these values is that's where we can define state. Of course, we can define in TypeScript private timer, and then the timer this dot count up. The count up actually generates an object. It returns an object, and a promised object actually, because this is defined async. And then this promised object will be the timer, and this is the actual generator object that is generating the values. Then we have, of course, our regular render function, which should return a return. It should return always, let me just be precise, import another value, template result, as I explained in the previous dot template result return. Then comes our HTML backtick tag template literal, and then here let's just for now define my timer colon, then a span. It's not really important, but then as usual, then comes the fancy stuff, async replace. Async replace requires one parameter, this dot timer, and then this async replace will generate we'll always invoke the yielded values, because this is an iterator. It provides every 100 milliseconds a value in the yield, and then this async replace is replacing it with the value defined here, async replace, and then this is the end of the story, end of the span, and the backtick is just there. Okay, and of course we could also define this usual in TypeScript. Instead of typing it here, let me just copy it from this declaration. This is only required for TypeScript programmers. Declare global interface HTML element tag name map my timer and my timer. Here you go. Okay, I've just created, it was quite fancy, and then let's check out how we can use it. Has only one property, run. Let's just enter somewhere here my timer and my timer, and let's just control save. My timer, and why it is not shown. That's very easy to figure out. The reason is that when you define a class, a custom element, this is just the definition, and it is the custom element which should be invoked to declare, to define for the browser. Therefore, we have to import it somewhere. In our case, let's just import dot my timer, Control S, and here you go. My timer is immediately displayed, but it is not running. Yes, because we remember that our timer, the default where is run is false, so therefore in the index.html we should define a run property, not property, attribute for it. Control S,